I would have said before a year ago, if I said, you need to sort this out and find a way out, I'd be overreacting if I said you could die. But we know that can happen.
When you're involved in it, you start to look for further instances, and it became very clear to us that there was a pattern to domestic abuse, and quite a strong pattern, quite a predictable pattern as well. And when we were able to reflect on this pattern, we were able to, at each of the stages, we were able to say, yep, that happened, yep, that happened, yep, that happened. Sadly, we weren't aware before the fact.
It doesn't just start with violent behaviour. It's the coercive behaviour. That's a start where you don't even see it coming. You think that someone cares about you because they're telling you, actually, that colour doesn't look right on you, so okay, I won't wear that. And then it gradually becomes more and more until you're completely sucked in. So the violence doesn't necessarily start from the beginning. It just builds and builds until they've got control of you. And I guess then you don't think for yourself. I guess you know that it's happening, but by then it's too late.
On the one hand, it's frightening how predictable it is, but on the other hand, that predictability gives you a bit of hope, because if it's that predictable, then we should be able to do something about it. Not in time for Keely and many others, sadly. But again, we don't know whether it's because we are now exposed to it, but we get the feeling that there is a tide that's turning. Now, maybe it's only turning to us because we are more aware and more relevant. We are more. We're looking for it, but we also get the impression that actually more of the average person on the street is becoming more aware as well. We certainly hope that's the case, but I guess we're not the best judge of that because we are exposed to it already. But we hope that more people are becoming more aware, and if they can be aware of the little signs that we missed. There won't always be domestic abuse, but sometimes, and sadly too often, they are. So if more people can be aware of those little signs and maybe just ask the question if they see one or more of them, then maybe somebody's lives can be saved.
You don't think it's going to end up with death. We certainly didn't. And now I think you probably, if you knew, you just say, it'll be okay, or it's just this, it's just that. But we know it's not. It could end like this. And now whenever I hear anything about the smallest thing, I can't stress enough how important it is to do something about it, because I can never overreact anymore.
We now know that her friends, or some friends, were aware that she was the victim of domestic abuse. We don't hold any, we don't blame any of them. They were good friends to Keely. She spoke highly of them, and they of her. So we know they were good friends. But they didn't, as Claire said, they didn't want to get involved. It's a bit of a cliche, but it was what goes on behind closed doors is private business, and they didn't want to get involved.
And it's not going to end with death.
No, and they don't. Although they consider it serious, they don't consider it life-threatening, and none of Keely's friends did at the time. There was one example actually when one of them, they did talk about the fact that he's going to end up killing you. Whether that was said flippantly or whether they actually believed it, we're not really sure. But it was said.
She said, if you don't leave, he'll end up killing you. And Keely said, if I leave, he'll kill me anyway.
But our message to people who do know is not to sit on it. I mean, just off. It's difficult to offer what the advice should be, but if those friends and family did genuinely suspect that it could end up with a death, then they would probably likely act differently. Few, if any, of Keely's friends genuinely thought that even though they knew that she was being beaten, that it would end up in her death. Had they known, they might have acted differently. Might have alerted somebody, maybe even alerted us. So we don't blame them, because people don't like to get involved in other people's business. But I'd just say that, you know, if you thought it might end up in someone's death, you might want to get involved. And when I say get involved, you can get involved in a whole lot of different ways. You know, you can just be there to speak for the victim to speak to. You can alert the victim's family. You know, like we could have been alerted. We will never know what might have happened had we been alerted or had other people been alerted. But it certainly couldn't have been any worse than it's ended up being. So we don't blame anyone. We don't blame her. There's only one person who's to blame for Keely's death, and it's not her friends. But just be aware that 2 women per week in the UK die as a result of domestic violence. So it's not as isolated as you might think. It's not as isolated as we thought. It really can be a life and death. When you meet up at Christmas with your family, statistically, there's probably at least one person in that room who has been or is the victim of domestic violence. So we want people to be more aware of how common this is. And if people are more aware of how common it is, they're more likely to look for it, and if they're looking for it, they're more likely to pick up the signs that we didn't. Of course, there's a flip side to that. That you that every glance or dirty look or something that is that you interpret the wrong way. But perhaps better to interpret it innocently, with the right intentions, than to ignore it. Not every instance of domestic violence ends in death, but as we said, 2 a week in the UK do. So it's much more common than we ever knew, and it's probably much more common than most people know. The ultimate piece of violence or act of violence was her murder, but it's really difficult for us to know as well that she had spent at least the last 3 years of her life probably in daily fear of a beating or manipulation or something. So it wasn't as awful as the 13th of December was. There's much more to it than that, and the terror and the fear that she would have experienced was probably lasted several years. We don't know exactly how long, but certainly 3 years and probably more. And so, we hope that if by doing this helps even one person, just one person, it's worth doing. We're happy to do it.
Yeah, we can't help Keely.
We can't help Keely, but if we can help someone else, then we'll feel slightly more comfortable. But the sad thing is that those murders aren't going to stop today, regardless of what we can do to raise awareness. But they might stop tomorrow or the next day. if we can help to raise that awareness, and if other people can be aware. So Keely's death, I was going to say, won't be the last. It hasn't been the last, but there can be a last if we're aware of it.